An American historical story. A nation forged. Before America had a flag, before it had a name strong enough to echo across oceans, it had a question. Can ordinary people decide their own fate? The answer was not written in books at first. It was written in frozen winters, in blood on distant fields, in whispered meetings by candlelight, and in the stubborn hope of farmers, merchants, soldiers, mothers, and dreamers who believed that history did not belong only to kings. This is the story of how that belief became a nation. 1. 13 uneasy colonies. In the early 1700s, the eastern edge of North America was a thin line of British colonies pressed between the Atlantic Ocean and an unknown continent. Life was hard and uneven. In the north, small towns revolved around trade, fishing, and shipbuilding. In the south, vast plantations grew wealthy on tobacco and rice, worked by enslaved Africans whose suffering was woven into the very foundation of the land. Though the colonies shared a language and a distant king, they were not one people. A farmer in Massachusetts had little in common with a planter in Virginia. Yet they shared one growing frustration. Decisions about their lives were being made an ocean away. British laws controlled trade, taxed goods, and restricted expansion westward. At first, these rules felt distant and manageable. But after Britain fought an expensive war with France, the empire looked to the colonies to pay the bill. Taxes arrived like unwelcome guests: the Stamp Act, the Townshend Acts, duties on tea. The message was clear: pay up. The colonists asked a dangerous question: why should we be taxed by a parliament where we had no voice? 2. Words that lit the fire. Revolutions do not begin with guns, they begin with words. Pamphlets circulated through taverns and churches. Newspapers argued boldly. One thin booklet written by an immigrant named Thomas Paine cut through fear like a blade. It was called Common Sense. Paine did not write like a scholar. He wrote like a man speaking to neighbors. He asked why an island should rule a continent. He asked why kings were treated as if chosen by God. And most dangerously, he suggested that independence was not only possible, but necessary. The idea spread fast. Farmers read it by firelight. Soldiers read it in camps. Suddenly, loyalty to the crown felt less like duty and more like chains. 3. The shot heard around the world. On a quiet April morning in 1775, British soldiers marched toward towns of Lexington and Concord to seize colonial weapons. They did not expect resistance. They were wrong. No one knows who fired the first shot, but once it rang out, there was no turning back. Farmers picked up muskets. Neighbors stood shoulder to shoulder. The British were forced to retreat under constant fire. The war had begun. Men who had never left their villages now faced the greatest military power in the world. 4. Declaring the impossible. In the summer of 1776, delegates gathered in Philadelphia. The room was hot. The decision before them was terrifying. To declare independence was to sign a death warrant if they failed. Yet they voted. The Declaration of Independence did not promise an easy future. It promised a bold one. It spoke of natural rights, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and claimed that governments existed to protect them. When the document was read aloud in public squares, bells rang and crowds cheered. But behind the celebration lay fear. Words were easy. War was not. 5. Winter of Despair. The Revolutionary War tested belief with hunger and cold. In the winter of 1777, the Continental Army camped at Valley Forge. Shoes wore through, food was scarce, disease spread. Men wrapped rags around their feet and left bloody footprints in the snow. Many wanted to quit. George Washington, quiet and steady, refused to let the army collapse. He wrote letters, begged Congress for supplies, and reminded his soldiers that they were fighting not for pay, but for the future. Slowly, training improved, discipline grew. The army survived. 6. Victory and uncertainty. Years later, with French support and relentless endurance, the Americans forced a British surrender at Yorktown. The war was over. The question returned, now what? Victory did not magically unite the states. The first government under the Articles of Confederation was weak. Money was scarce. Arguments were constant. Some feared chaos. Others feared tyranny. Once again, words would shape the future. 7. Writing a new system. In 1787, delegates met to rewrite the rules entirely. The Constitution they created was not perfect. It was a compromise between large states and small ones, between freedom and control, between ideals and reality. It created 3 branches of government, each meant to restrain the others. Power would be divided, authority would be questioned. This system assumed something radical, that humans were flawed and government must be designed with that truth in mind. When the Bill of Rights was added, promising freedoms of speech, religion, and assembly, the nation took a fragile but decisive step forward. 8. Expansion and contradiction. As the young nation grew, it moved westward. New lands promised opportunity. Wagons rolled across plains, towns rose from dust. But expansion came at a cost. Native American nations were pushed from ancestral lands through treaties, force, and broken promises. At the same time, the contradiction at America's heart deepened. How could a nation founded on liberty allow slavery to continue? The question haunted every generation. 9. A nation divided. By the mid-1800s, the country stood split. Industry surged in the north. Plantations dominated the south. One side believed slavery must end. The other believed its way of life depended on it. When compromise failed, war returned. The Civil War was not glorious. It was brutal, personal, and devastating. Brothers fought brothers. Fields became graveyards. Abraham Lincoln, burdened and determined, framed the conflict as a test. Could a nation conceived in liberty endure? 10. Freedom at a terrible price. When the war ended, slavery was abolished. The Union survived. But peace did not mean equality. Reconstruction offered hope, then faded. Segregation laws rose. Violence silenced progress. Yet the promise of freedom did not die. It waited. 11. Industry, immigrants, and change. At the turn of the 20th century, factories roared. Cities grew upward and outward. Immigrants arrived by the millions, carrying languages, customs, and dreams. America became louder, faster, and more powerful. It also became more unequal. Workers organized. Women demanded the vote. Slowly, the definition of who counted began to expand.